Holy Gospel according to St. John. On the third day there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." I bet it hadn't after saying that to his mom. His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, and they filled them up to the brim. Each had 20 to 30 gallons in them. Jesus said, "Fill the jars. Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and didn't know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you've kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs, in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory. And the disciples believed in him. The Gospel of the Lord. Please be seated. There are so many different ways to approach this text. I could talk about how in each of the Gospels there's a different revelation, the first reveal, if you will, to who Jesus is. And in John, it's this. It's the wedding at Cana in Galilee. And the other three different stories for the first reveal. But in each of them, there is a conclusion, and it's similar to this one. The disciples believed in him. There is a reveal for each of us. There are moments in each of our lives that you could turn to one who is special to you. It could be your child, when this one was revealed to you. When Wendy said, "Hey, Dad, here's your daughter." There's a reveal. You would have experienced that with Madison. You would have experienced it with Andrew and with Abby. And your mother would have experienced with you, the second born. There is a reveal in our relationships when we move from "I like you" to "I love you." There's a reveal in a congregation when a pastor can join with the congregation and the congregation join with the pastor. And there are those moments where it's revealed that there's a failure to launch, that no matter how hard either side was trying, if they were thinking in the best of terms, it just didn't click. The reveal is always there. It does take some training, however, to have eyes to see. I could have approached this text for today, and I could have talked about just that phrase alone, "Woman, what concern?" And you've heard me say for 10 years, every time I have a chance to say this, I chuckle. I never, ever said that to Ellen Jane Mockimer. There was no circumstance that even when I was at my worst, that I would have ever said, "Woman." How many of you grew up in homes similar to mine? How many of you may have been exposed to the reveal of a left hand or soap? I could have approached this with talking about the unbelievable abundance, generosity, 20 to 30 gallons, these jars. There would have been enough wine, not just for the guests for the 3 days of the wedding celebration, but with that amount and all of the abundance that God creates, it would last forever and ever and ever. I could have talked about people that go to college and someone in charge of a party in their senior year that actually can go buy the beer. They buy good beer for the first round, and then it just doesn't matter what you buy after that because nobody cares. I could have talked about all that, but I don't want to do that. I want to talk about what, for me, when I read the passage and I prepare for a message, it's much like Lectio Divina. I read it once, what jumps off the page. I read it a second time. Has anything shifted? Am I still going down that same path, and did it deepen at all? Or did my eyes shift, and my heart shift, and my mind shift? And then finally, a third time, the question I ask is, God, are you asking me to do something or to not do something? And I approach the text like that, well, pretty much any time I read Scripture. I'll read it multiple times with that framework, that way of looking at it in my mind. Hopefully, for it to drop into my belly and drop into my heart as well, and then into my hands and my feet and do something. But I want to talk about instead grace, because I've taught you grace is getting what you don't deserve, and mercy is not getting what you do deserve. But in that teaching, while it may be accurate in a two-dimensional way of thinking, it does lack depth. And believing that today was going to be a smaller crowd, and believing that today the faithful will come out in the midst of a snowstorm or the impending snowstorm, I thought maybe I'd take the chance of those of you in the room and those watching online or listening online to maybe perhaps deepen what is so core to our identity theologically as a church. We actually have core values as a Lutheran denomination. We have a core belief, and grace is one of those most essential components of the package of our core theological things that we are convicted. They are our convictions. So let me deal with it this way, if you go with me for a moment. In the New Revised Standard Version, did I just say that like a Pennsylvania German? Version. Oh, my word. Yeah, we're going to talk about verse number 6. Now they were justified by his grace as a gift. There it is. Justified by his grace as a gift through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. A gift. J.B. Phillips describes God's generous dealing with us. And in particular, how many of you read The Message by Eugene Peterson? I like that. That's quick read, right? That's a snack pack, if you will. My way of looking at it. But also it's pretty good at times. Talks about God putting us in right standing, or out of sheer generosity, he talks about grace as a gift. Those are not to be, those approaches and that way of defining grace shouldn't be taken lightly. But you should know, while they are accessible to us and they help us be concrete, and for most people, just give it to me as briefly as you can so I can remember it. It falls short of the true essence of grace and the three-dimensional way of experiencing grace. So in the Gospel of John, what we just read, the text for today, it moves us beyond to grace, meaning abundance. Our congregation has been richly blessed with grace. We have abundance in leadership that are highly trained, highly equipped, and I would say that you have, for many of you, over this last decade, created a skill set and a knowledge base that matches many people who have seminary degrees. You understand a core theology, you understand an approach, you understand that it's not about the destination, but a direction. You understand that it's God journeying with you. You have learned that small group work is essential, just like the disciples lived and breathed and worked in a small group, and Jesus was the teacher, the rabbi. You have created not just a place where small groups happen and you have a teacher in your midst, but you have many teachers in your midst. You also have learned that teachers, while they are very similar in their approach theologically, you're going to get different personalities. not unlike the four gospel writers. Matthew doesn't write like John, John doesn't write like Mark, and Mark doesn't write like Luke. So we as a congregation are in many ways an equipping ministry. We are a discipleship-focused ministry. We are God-centered. We are also gracious and abundant, and I think becoming even better at when someone fails, when there's a wound. We are better at receiving it and softer in our approach. Folks that are holding on to that rigid, judgmental stuff, boy, you stand out like a sore thumb. And you actually isolate yourself. And you pull yourself away from people just by that very judgmental position. Authoritarianism doesn't really work well in our congregation any longer. But it's not working really well even in our culture either. And it's causing heartbreak, where God wants to touch hearts, heal hearts, and reveal that grace is about abundance. It's that unbelievable, more than you could possibly ever imagine, abundance. The wine that Jesus turned that water into, the best tasting wine, came not just because of the love of the Creator, but it came about because of a poignant moment. To not have wine, to run out of wine, would have been not just a social faux pas, but it would have been a total disaster. Jesus did more than provide a lubricant, a party lubricant. What word? He provided more than just a happy experience with a glass of wine. He actually showed the greatest gift, the one that people minimize all the time. Because for sure, in spiritual giftedness, isn't preaching a higher ranking gift and spiritual gift than healing? Not for the one that needs healing. Isn't teaching a higher ranking gift than the one who has a gift in administration? Only for those who are hungry to be taught. But I think perhaps one of the greatest gifts is hospitality. Jesus, in the Gospel of John, reveals the spiritual gift of hospitality. So if you are a kind and gracious host or hostess, if we are a congregation that can be known in our community and beyond as not just having been blessed with abundance, but a congregation that takes so incredibly seriously that fragile treasure, that fragile pot, cracked pot, if you will, and we hold it very tenderly, and we measure it, and we explore it with faith, and we deliver our financial abundance to those in need, and we move beyond our walls. For surely this building, over 2/3 of it is empty most of the time. I spent some time at Christ Lutheran Church a few months back. That's a congregation in Allentown. I was actually interviewed to go there many years ago. I think I was still in New Tripoli. Before I went to Fleetwood, I had the opportunity to interview there. And I remember walking through a building. Now, how many of you have been through our whole building? How many of you know how and why it would have taken me a couple days to get used to which path works and how you get to there? Now imagine a building 5-6 times the size of this. That's Christ Lutheran Church in Allentown. And when I walked through there, it wasn't just empty. It no longer had life in most of the areas except for the sanctuary and where the offices were and some of the classrooms. They were gigantic at one time. And I got to tell you, in their small size now, they are still, while the building has many, many empty spaces like ours, there is life in that place. those people are committed to loving God and loving their neighbors. They have had pastors actually out on the street with cookies inviting people in. That's part of why we did cookies on the sidewalk under the cross, to try and welcome people into this place. And then we went beyond that, because in addition to that inward-focused work, we started to work out into our community. And that's why we've gotten involved in many things in our community. We have been blessed with grace of abundance, an unbelievably, more than you can possibly imagine, abundance. What would you do with 15, 16, 17 million dollars if you had it? Because you do. You do. But it's restricted. You have wealth. What will you do with it? Where will you focus your dollars? Where will you focus your dollars and your presence to serve God's kingdom so that people will come to know Jesus, the one who offers grace, not just saving grace, but a three-dimensional grace where we are blown away and our hands are up in the air praising God because we could have never, ever imagined in our mind more than our own calculations, our own estimations, our own very short-sighted visions. Grace is an overflowing joy, blessing, and presence of God. We've been hardwired, and it's been reinforced recently in weeks and months and years to be fear-filled, to be anxious. Good God, social media is going to be gone. The end of the world is coming. I'd even choose watching a football game over that. Grace is so much more than God overlooking our misdeeds. Grace isn't making up for what we lack. Grace really is understanding, accepting, and being thankful for being provided for in ways that could never have been imagined. You are blessed. Kathy, you just had two little ones back there. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. Oops, he's going away from the pulpit. This is dangerous. I'm even imagining it now. You're thinking that too, Ashley, aren't you? Because here we go with what was once a short sermon. Your legacy, no one will ever be able to preach your obituary and a resume, because your legacy is found in the people whose lives you've touched. And I know these two little ones, and I've heard about you. They talk about you behind your back. And they do. And they did on the retreat. And they talk about the people who are influencing them. And they're young. Your legacy. Two of them right there. An older one right there. All of them powerful believers, in part that you had a chance, an opportunity, and you took it to shape them. Everyone in this room today, would you kindly go home and write a note to someone? Would you write an email? Would you make a phone call? Would you say something to someone and either thank them for how they've touched your life and helped you grow closer to God, or invite them into something? We have a men's retreat coming up. And for some, to leave on Friday and return on Sunday, the time can be challenging. And we don't want to miss that opportunity. We somehow have to find a way to be able to capture people and not just have a few of us go away and eat a ton of food. It's a ton of food. And they've been dry. Just so you know, those weekends are dry weekends. A lot of social gatherings have plenty of social lubricant in them. And while we are not against that here in this church, we are not against drinking, we're against getting drunk. We don't advise it. And we need people to be safe, of course. The retreats have been dry. But they've been really good. We're trying to figure that out. So guys, if you can't make a whole weekend, I mean, I don't think I've ever made a whole weekend. I go up Friday night, hang out with them, and then Saturday before dinner, actually head back home. And then I'm in the pulpit the next day. You're going to have another event. You know about the overnight the Girl Scouts are going to have? We have a Girl Scout event coming up. And last time we had over 50 kids and adults. What's the event that you would want to have happen here that would be more of a social event and fun? Can you think of something that you'd like to do to have fun? Would you involve a musical group and then have a party afterward? What are some things that we could do to have fun? That we could voice back to God. We recognize the gift of abundance that never could have been imagined. What could we do? Think about it, and you've got my email address. Shoot me an email and say, I'm thinking about this. Send an email to John Gear. John likes fun, right, Ashley? Yeah. He's not a boring dad? He's not a boring dad? His jokes aren't boring? Mine are worse than... Yeah. You've had about a minute to think about it. Have you thought of anything that you'd like to do? I wish we could take a trip. I wish we could find an inexpensive way to take people into Broadway. I wish we could go to Carnegie Hall. I wish we could go down to Philadelphia to the Kimmel Center. I like music. I like performances. I like to be able to sit and fall asleep. How many of you have seen Wicked? I fell asleep in Wicked. So, I mean, it's a great opportunity to just rest. How many of you need some abundant rest? Yeah. Just wanted to throw it out there. Today's a day of conversation, and I'm appreciative. Sam and I were talking about the opening song. The words are great. That's Marty Haugen. Marty Haugen always has good words. But I was standing next to Amy. I said, Amy, check out the congregation. Let's see if they sing to this one. How many of you found it a little bit challenging to sing to that song? A little challenging? Because we don't sing it a lot. But look at those words. That's good theology. That is really good theology. And I love singing something that actually means something.